So maybe you're kind of like me and you've heard a lot about the 7 deadly sins, but you don't really know a lot about them. That's kind of how I was. For me, the 7 deadly sins and the 7 dwarfs might as well have been the same people. I didn't know a whole lot about them. And actually in my research for this speech, I found out there's actually 7 corresponding virtues that are the exact opposites of the 7 deadly sins. But we as Methodists don't hear a lot about them because it's more of a Catholic tradition. So this was a new experience for me. And so in researching the 7 deadly sins, like I said, they come from the Catholic Church. The list has changed a little bit over the years. The original list of 7 deadly sins is not the same list that we have today. So I don't know if God's changed his mind a little bit, or if the church just didn't quite get it right. But the 7 deadly sins we have now are in fact different than the original 7 deadly sins. The final list of the 7 deadly sins came into existence about 600 AD, give or take a few years there. And it's basically a list of sins that lead to the destruction of God's grace in our lives. If you commit one of these sins, you're not going to automatically die, but it is a sin that when you do it seriously enough over a long enough period of time, it destroys the grace of God in your life. Emily, my daughter, was watching Franklin this morning. It's a cartoon, and it's got a turtle in it. And it's about Franklin and his group of friends. And this morning's episode was about Franklin, and he sees his friend Rabbit riding a scooter. And Franklin really wants that scooter. Really wants that scooter. To the point where he borrows, well, he steals half of his parents' belongings to try to sell them in a yard sale to get money to buy the scooter. He tries to cheat a few neighbor friends out of money to buy the scooter. He just wants this scooter so bad because he's seen Rabbit with it, and it's killing him that he doesn't have one too. That's envy. That's the deadly sin that we're going to talk about today. Envy. Envy is defined as an insatiable desire for what others have. Dante, poet and writer, said, envy is a desire to deprive other men of theirs. Thomas Aquinas put it this way: envy, according to the aspect of its object, is contrary to charity. Whence the soul derives its spiritual life, charity rejoices in our neighbor's good, while envy grieves over it. Envy is actually directly tied to one of the 10 Commandments. In the book of Exodus we hear, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house, wife, slaves, ox, donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbors." Coveting, envy, the desire for what somebody else has, that's all envy. In modern times now, we often confuse envy with jealousy, but they're actually 2 different things. Oftentimes when we say we're jealous of someone, we're actually envious of them. Jealousy is when you're afraid somebody else is going to take away something you already have. Envy is wanting something that somebody else has that you do not yet have. So we may be jealous of somebody that they're going to perhaps steal our spouse or steal a friend away from us. But we're envious when somebody has something that we don't have, like that house with 1 more bedroom than what we have, or that car that goes a few miles per hour faster than ours does. We all experience envy. It's almost everywhere. You can see it between people, between corporations, between countries, even between churches. So why is it so dangerous if it seems like it's everywhere? Why is it included in this list of 7 deadly sins? Why is it deadly? Bertrand Russell said, "Envy is one of the most potent causes of unhappiness." Envy leads to our unhappiness. Envy is the enemy of contentment. It takes that joy that we should be feeling that we get from God and His blessings and turns it upside down. It makes us not love our neighbors and not do things to help the poor and the needy and the widows and the orphans. It takes away our contentment and our joy that we find in Jesus Christ. Envy, pure and simple, can easily lead to hatred. Hatred can easily lead to all sorts of horrible, horrible sins. The Reverend Bruce Williams actually said that the 7 deadly sins, he didn't see them as to be sins, but rather 7 capital vices. 7 things that, if you believe in, that you feel will lead to even more terrible sins. The deadly sin of envy leads to hate, the opposite of what Paul tells us is the greatest of all powers created by God. love. It's the very opposite of what God would want us to do. And yet it seems to be everywhere. In the Bible, there are so many different examples of envy. From the very, very beginning, even with Adam and Eve envying that power that they thought God had, that they didn't. Cain envying Abel and his relationship with God. King Saul envying David. The two harlots that come and present the baby in front of King Solomon, each arguing that it's their own because one of them was so envious that the other one had a child that they didn't. Into the New Testament with the religious leaders of Christ's day being envious of the authority with which he spoke. Envy leads to hate. In each of these circumstances and many, many others that you can find in the Bible, envy leads to hate. And in all of these circumstances, and in two, in fact, murder occurred because of envy. And in the other two, it almost happened because of envy. Do you see how destructive envy can be if it's not properly dealt with, if we don't keep it in check? Socrates said, "Envy is the daughter of pride, the author of murder and revenge, the begetter of secret sedition, the perpetual tormentor of virtue. Envy is the slime of the soul," is what he said. Envy causes us to be unhappy and miserable. It instills hate towards us and projects that hate outwards towards others. The book of Proverbs tells us it's worse than wrath and anger. Envy is worse than wrath and anger. It's the rottenness of the bones. It's a cancer growing in our soul. It strikes at the very core of us and taints us, colors everything we see and do with hate. Envy has wreaked havoc on the world since Adam and Eve first grew envious that God had some sort of knowledge that they didn't. Just consider these examples from recent news. Politicians trying to get at other politicians' power just through illegal means. There's stories of teens being envious of others' shoes and killing them for a pair of shoes. News stories of women being envious of others' pregnancies and actually stealing the child or killing the mother because of it. Stories of people cheating and stealing because they're envious of friends, neighbors, co-workers, or relatives. Envy really is the rottenness of the bones. It gets at us when we least expect it. Envy destroys us as people, as communities, countries, and as a world. It can destroy us as a church and get at us to where we only see hate and forget about God's direction to love one another. Envy led to the first sin and has been causing sin everywhere ever since. The good news about envy, though, is like I said, there's corresponding virtues to each deadly sin. And the corresponding virtue to envy is charity. When we reach out to others and give them what we have simply because they have not. When we pray for others who have things that we don't. When we pray for God's blessing on them. We're told that helps with envy. That helps soften it. That helps deaden it. To where we stop feeling the hate and we start to only feel the love. Prayer and charity. Two simple fixes to envy. An insatiable desire for what others have. I think our world is running rampant with envy right now. And I pray that we can all find a little charity and prayer to help it stop. Thank you. Does anybody